David, my husband, was drinking while driving and struck someone, then deceived me by insisting that I shoulder the blame and endure imprisonment on his behalf. Upon my release from jail, I discovered that David had already remarried, and astonishingly, his new wife was Megan, my closest friend. Our 5-year-old daughter, Lily, was being subjected to cruel treatment, chained to the balcony and living in deplorable conditions. Fearing that I might seek vengeance, they deliberately ran me over with a car, resulting in my untimely death. However, as my eyes fluttered open, I realized I had been granted a second chance at life. David was on his knees before me, desperately imploring me to take the fall for him. I forcefully pushed him aside and declared, "Go to prison, you murderer! David, how could you be so heartless?" My anger surged, and I felt an intense desire to destroy him. Instead, I chose to first calm him down. Observing his panicked state, I pretended to agree to his request to change clothes, but secretly locked the door and immediately contacted the authorities. When the police arrived, David was visibly startled, banging on the bathroom door, pleading for me to open it. The officers discovered him hiding in the closet, in a state of undress, and arrested him despite my objections. As they escorted David away, our 2-year-old daughter emerged, innocently asking why I was crying. While managing David's arrest, my in-laws arrived, placing blame on me for his predicament. They accused me of failing to inform them, but I quickly asserted control, mentioning Megan, who had a relative working at the police station. Arrangements were made in an attempt to resolve the issue. When Megan arrived, she was initially reluctant to provide financial assistance, but eventually offered to lend me $200,000. Megan had her own secrets as well. She had been in the car during the accident. If this information became public, it could jeopardize her job. Despite the potential consequences, Megan agreed to help, but could only provide $200,000. I looked at her gratefully, thinking, "Megan, David will certainly remember your kindness. If David manages to get out, I will assist them in reuniting. A wretch and a despicable person together, they are a perfect match, and it would be a shame if they remained apart." After dealing with the deceitful Megan, I turned my attention to my in-laws. My mother-in-law looked at me directly, saying, "David has gotten into serious trouble. Your side of the family should help. He has a retirement pension that should be utilized now. That old scoundrel is even targeting my father. Mom, I have already contacted my father's side. His retirement pension is fully invested and will take a week to withdraw. He promised me that once the funds are available, they would be transferred immediately." In a week, David would have long been gone. My in-laws were anxious and demanded that I hand over the $200,000 borrowed from Megan, stating that they would manage things on their own. Were they suspicious of me? I promptly handed over the money and proactively provided the location of the hospital where the victim was treated. "Mom, Dad, you need to act quickly." Whether it was pleading for forgiveness or being berated and threatened by the other party, I insisted they accept the money and obtain a letter of forgiveness. Upon hearing this, a look of fear flashed across my mother-in-law's face as I added, "You must also comfort the victim's family and ensure that no follow-up work is neglected. Even if it requires begging or making sacrifices, ensure their forgiveness." A hint of unease appeared on Megan's face before she persuaded me, "Emily, Aunt and Uncle are elderly. It's not appropriate for them to handle this. You should go instead." I hesitated, glancing at my mother-in-law. In the next moment, the elderly woman handed me a card directly, saying, "You go." I felt a quiet sense of triumph, but had to feign reluctance. Having passively accepted everything for so long, my mother-in-law would never suspect I had the courage to take such action. My mother-in-law scolded me again. "Why aren't you leaving yet? Don't you want to save David?" I immediately headed out. Afterwards, I went inside to collect my daughter, preparing to leave. Seeing me with Lily, doubt flickered in my mother-in-law's eyes. "Why are you taking the victim's family with you?" I feigned helplessness and responded, "Mom, Lily is so young. The other side might pity our child and possibly agree to a lesser settlement." Hearing my explanation, my mother-in-law nodded in agreement. "At least you have some sense. Hurry and go." I quickly left with Lily, not daring to linger. My daughter was my weakness. Only after ensuring her safety could I properly deal with these villains. Upon leaving the house, I immediately transferred the funds from the bank account. Seeing the balance on my phone, I couldn't help but laugh aloud, thinking, consider this $800,000 as compensation for my youth. If David wants to emerge from prison, so be it. It's all just part of their twisted game, and I will play along. I disappeared for an entire morning, during which my in-laws were frantic, nearly blowing up my phone. Megan was also trying to reach me through various channels. That evening, I initiated contact with Megan, providing her with an address and asking her to come find me alone, without informing my in-laws. When she knocked on the door, I rose and slightly opened it to see Megan standing outside. After a brief evaluation, I confirmed she was alone and let her in. As soon as Megan entered, she began complaining. "Emily, what are you doing? Ignoring calls and messages, planning to vanish?" I stood with my arms crossed, staring at her. Perhaps sensing her frustration, Megan abruptly changed her tone. "Emily, I'm just so worried about you, which is why I'm so upset. David is cheating. How did you know?" She looked at me incredulously. "I happened to see the transaction records on his phone, as well as their hotel reservation for Valentine's Day. I'm certain he's being unfaithful. However, I haven't identified the third party yet." Upon hearing this, Megan visibly relaxed and asked, "So, what are you going to do?" I responded coldly, "If David is heartless, I'll be merciless. Let him rot in prison. As for that third party, I will find her without fail." Megan turned pale with fear, staring blankly ahead. I suddenly patted her shoulder, making her jump in fright. "Megan, what's on your mind? Your expression is so strange." Feeling guilty, Megan avoided my gaze. "It's nothing. I'm just surprised that David would actually cheat." I thought, why wasn't she surprised when they were having an affair? "Megan, do me a favor. I want to divorce David." Megan looked up at me abruptly. "Divorce? But David is currently in jail. How can you divorce him?" "As long as I obtain evidence of David's affair, I can file for divorce," I explained. The mention of evidence nearly terrified Megan, who asked me what kind of proof I needed. I told her that David had once taken that woman to their new home for the night, and the surveillance at the new house should have captured these moments. Only David and his parents had keys to that house. To secure the evidence, I planned to force entry with a locksmith and have Megan distract David's parents while I went to their home. Megan readily agreed, asking when I would repay the $200,000 she lent me. The money she had secretly saved from David over the years exceeded that amount. How dare she ask for more? But at the moment, I couldn't afford to fall out with her. "I will repay you after I've finished dividing the property with David." Very reluctantly, Megan felt guilty and dared not ask me again. Late at night, Megan called me, questioning why I hadn't gone to the new house to gather the evidence. "Am I trying to set a trap for myself?" I asked her. "How do you know I didn't go to the new house?" There was silence on the other end until I devised an excuse. "Megan, you must care about me. You secretly followed me to the new house and saw me turn around and leave, right?" Megan quickly admitted, then asked why I had turned back. I responded, "I saw lights on inside and guessed someone was there." "Megan, was this just a coincidence, or was there a leak?" Megan didn't dare answer and changed the subject, asking where I was, but I didn't tell her. Making up an excuse, I hung up the phone. After sleeping for an unknown number of hours, there was a knock at the door. I got up and opened it to find my in-laws standing outside with stern expressions. My mother-in-law's eyes fixed on me. "You wretch! How dare you take the money and run away?" As she spoke, my mother-in-law pulled out a stick from behind and swung it at me. I quickly dodged, causing her to lose balance and fall to the ground. Struggling to stand, she lunged at me again. "Emily, you deceitful woman! You didn't save my son and ran away with the money." I walked over and sat down on the sofa, quietly listening to her curses that they must have been led astray. Here was my best friend, right? My father-in-law, in contrast to my mother-in-law, remained calm as he pulled her back and said in a strange tone, "Didn't you see she's deaf? Save your breath. She scammed us for money. Let's report her to the police directly. Once David is released, she won't be spared." My mother-in-law strongly agreed. "Yes, report her to the police and let her go to jail. Let's see how that old man and his despicable daughter can live without this wicked mother. This old woman, if she didn't like me, fine. But to harbor such hatred towards her own granddaughter, how could that be? No wonder, after I was in prison, she let Megan, that wicked woman, abuse my daughter. With nowhere else to vent my anger, I raised my hand and slapped my mother-in-law across the face. She was knocked to the ground by my strike, staring at me in shock. "How dare you hit me?" I rushed forward and kicked her. "I'm not just going to hit you, I'm going to kick you," I continued. "You old hag, try saying one more bad word about my daughter." If it weren't for going to jail for killing someone, I would definitely have slaughtered these two old people today. My father-in-law was so angry he stomped his feet, took out his phone, and threatened to call the police. I angrily shouted, "Go ahead and call the police. Let them properly investigate the origin of that money." Hearing my words, my father-in-law stopped looking at me in surprise. I coldly smiled. "What are you afraid or hesitating to call the police? Claim that I cheated you out of money and have the police investigate where that money really came from, as well as all the funds remaining in your accounts. Investigate thoroughly." My father-in-law panicked, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he held the phone. "What do you know after all?" I coldly stated. At least I slept in the same bed as David, so I know a little about the dirty things he did. As for the specifics of what David did at the company, I really don't know. In my previous life, when I was released from prison, David and Megan were already thriving. Within just a few years, they were living in a villa, driving luxury cars, and amassed tens of millions in assets. Seeking revenge against my husband, I continued to investigate and finally discovered that he was secretly moving the company's assets. For revenge against my husband, I kept investigating and finally found out about him secretly moving the company assets. Before I could clear things up, I was killed by David and Megan acting together. Last night, I deliberately had Megan persuade the in-laws to come to their new home while I went to their house to find evidence. David didn't confront me, but he had no guard against his father. The information and evidence of the wrongdoing he committed were all hidden in the in-laws' house. These two, father and son, are truly despicable. I don't have enough evidence in my hands yet, but it's more than sufficient to scare this old man. I spoke vaguely, but my father-in-law believed I truly had evidence, and his face turned pale. He signaled to my mother-in-law, and her demeanor immediately softened towards me. "Emily, you have been staying in our house for so long. We have always treated you like a daughter. How can you do this when David is in trouble? What about your marital bond? After all, he is Lily's father, right?" I sneered disdainfully. Marital bond? When he was fooling around and finding mistresses, did he care about my feelings? I deliberately shifted the conversation from hatred to jealousy in relationships. My mother-in-law's expression softened slightly, attempting to appease me. "Let David off this time for the sake of our daughter," she said. She dared to mention her granddaughter now, who had just been the target of my insults. "What a shameless old woman! You better leave if nothing's wrong. Let me be alone." My in-laws, fearing I might report them to the police, dared not mention the money again and made an excuse to leave. Watching their hasty departure, I guessed they were likely going to destroy the evidence. Let's see who is faster. "Emily, there's news. Come quickly." I received a call from my good friend Kate and rushed to the hospital. Only in my second life did I truly understand who was genuine and who was not around me. Kate and Megan, along with Megan, had grown up together in the same neighborhood since childhood, but my relationship with Kate was not as close as with Megan. Megan had said that Kate was too arrogant and advised me not to get too close to her. Later, I realized that Megan was jealous of Kate because Kate came from a better family. The only person who had helped me when I was released from prison last time was Kate. Today, without money, I would have starved on the streets long ago if it weren't for her help. "Emily, this..." I turned and saw Kate. She handed me her phone, asking me to watch the video she had recorded. Her words were filled with anger. "I never expected Megan to be so despicable after knowing you for over a decade." In the video, my mother-in-law was seen accompanying Megan as they walked hand in hand to the gynecology department of the hospital. In my previous life, when I was released from prison, Megan and David's child was already 3 years old. In other words, Megan had become pregnant shortly after I was imprisoned. While I was still adjusting to life behind bars, David couldn't wait to ask for a divorce. He claimed he didn't want his daughter's mother to be labeled as an inmate when she started school. Thinking of their poor daughter, I agreed to the divorce. But The truth was that Megan was pregnant with a boy. Only then did David urgently seek a divorce from me to marry her. Knowing Megan's nature, if she found out she was pregnant, she would definitely turn to David. Now that David had been arrested, her next target would be my mother-in-law. After securing my daughter that day, I immediately went to find Kate. She lived across from Megan and me, so I asked her to keep an eye on Megan. "Kate, thank you so much this time." Kate patted my shoulder comfortingly. "Don't mention it. I can't stand people who stab others in the back. What do you plan to do next? If you want the divorce to succeed, you must obtain evidence of his affair." The child in Megan's womb would be the most compelling evidence. With this child and the footage from the car's surveillance camera, I have enough proof. I am planning to get a divorce, I explained. Kate nodded in agreement. Why keep a scumbag like him around? Don't go easy on Megan. She's too wicked, treating you like a fool. I won't let this bitch off the hook, I declared. Thinking of all the things she did to my daughter, I wanted nothing more than to skin her alive. When my father had an accident, I paused. When I received the call, I collapsed to the ground. If it weren't for the kind passers-by helping me, I wouldn't even know how to get to the hospital. Kate, is my father okay? At the hospital, I held Kate's hand tightly, staring helplessly at the operating room. Kate couldn't answer my question. She just kept comforting me while apologizing. Emily, I'm sorry, I never thought I'd be followed. It's not Kate's fault. David knew the address of my hometown. He was aware that my father and daughter were my weaknesses, and my hometown was not safe. So I asked Kate to help me find a place to temporarily settle them. I looked around and couldn't see my daughter. My heart raced as I wondered, where is Lily? Lily had been taken away by her grandmother. I was in a hurry to take my uncle to the hospital and didn't have time for Lily. My mind was in chaos, wanting to go and snatch back my daughter, but I couldn't bear to leave my father in the operating room. It must be Megan. Only she could have informed Kate, thus discovering the whereabouts of my father. My inner anger surged to its peak. If I don't tear this woman apart, I don't deserve to be a daughter or a mother. The surgery ended in time. My father was delivered successfully, with no immediate danger to his life. Upon learning this news, I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After entrusting Kate to care for my father, I went straight to my in-laws' house. I absolutely couldn't let my daughter fall into the hands of these scoundrels. When my in-laws opened the door and saw me, their faces immediately darkened. What are you doing here? I pushed past her, trying to enter the house, but was firmly blocked at the door. You wicked woman! Our house can accommodate you. Get out! Megan, give me back my daughter. Otherwise, don't blame me for destroying everything. Facing my threat, my mother-in-law was indifferent. Lily is my granddaughter. She'll learn bad things from you, you wicked woman. Time was limited. I didn't want to waste too much time arguing with this old woman. Old witch, I'll ask you one last time. Do you want to give my daughter back to me? Before my mother-in-law could respond, I heard Megan's voice behind her. Emily, what's going on? How can you talk to Auntie like that? I turned around and slapped Megan across the face without hesitation. I showed no mercy. She covered her face, looking at me with surprise. Emily, are you crazy? You even hit me? I'm hitting you, you wicked woman. What have you done? Have you no guilt in your heart? She couldn't meet my eyes, feeling guilty, and stubbornly tried to defend herself. What are you saying? I have no idea. Let's go down together. Even if I die, I will drag these scumbags to hell with me. Megan looked at me suspiciously, then opened her phone in a panic. She stared at the screen in shock, trembling. How is this possible? You've gone mad. I had sent the video from the car's recorder to Megan's work group. In the video, the two of them were so reckless in the car. Megan's moans were also heard in the video. You love me so passionately. Aren't you afraid of not being able to explain to your wife when you get back? David said, forget that yellow-faced woman, it's a damper. How can her saggy and loose flesh compare to your enchanting allure? Oh, so my years of hard work were just seen as a yellow-faced woman in David's eyes. The reason I didn't explode at first but pretended to cooperate with them was to gather all the evidence that would be beneficial to me. Yes, I have gone crazy. You've driven me to madness. My father and Lily are my bottom line. If you dare to touch them, then let's die together. As I approached, Megan nervously backed away, looking at me with fear. When did you find out? I grabbed her by the collar and questioned her. We've known each other for more than 10 years. I treated you as my best friend. Why would you treat me like this? Megan, are you even human?" Megan suddenly laughed, looking somewhat smug as she stared at me. "You kept flaunting in front of me, boasting about how much your husband loves you and takes care of the family. Well, I just wiggled my finger, and he took the bait." "Did I flaunt? I thought of you as a good friend, hoping you could find happiness, encouraging you to get married early." But in her eyes, somehow it became my boasting. "Just because of this, you can shamelessly seduce someone else's husband? You're truly despicable." Megan stomped her foot in frustration. "I advise you to quickly take down the video and then claim that you intentionally framed me. Otherwise, you will regret it." I chuckled. How thick-skinned must Megan be to say such words? "Then tell me, how exactly are you going to make me regret it?" I retorted. Megan glared at me maliciously. "I can make it so you never see your daughter again," she threatened. "Don't you think it's despicable?" Megan nodded smugly. "Yes, your daughter is in my hands. If you don't listen and do as I say, don't blame me for taking action against your daughter. I will turn to look at my in-laws standing behind me. Regardless, Lily is still David's granddaughter." "How can you treat her like this?" My mother-in-law sneered. "That bread is just compensation. Megan is carrying our family's grandchild. Do as Megan demands quickly, or don't blame us for being rough with that little wench. Cutting off limbs is nothing to us. If you provoke us, we'll kill her directly. That heartless old thing." Megan's heart was truly ruthless. Impatiently, Megan urged me on, looking like an ant on a hot pan. With every second of delay, it meant another person witnessing her ugly side. "Emily, I advise you to hurry up. Otherwise, be prepared for your daughter's funeral." I stared at her and burst out laughing. Confused, she scrutinized me and demanded, "What are you laughing at?" I gestured for her to turn around. Behind her, several police officers were already approaching us. Megan had not yet grasped what was happening. Just looking puzzled at me, she questioned, "You called the police?" I raised my phone. The screen indicated an ongoing call. "Megan, I called the police station when you arrived. The entire conversation was monitored by the police. You and these two old folks are now caught red-handed with the kidnapping of my daughter. I suggest you be honest." "Do you really think I'm a fool, knowing well that they took away my daughter just to threaten me? Why did I walk right into their trap willingly on my way from the hospital? I had already called the police." Megan dared to have someone follow Kate, snatch my daughter to threaten me. Naturally, she has to face the corresponding legal consequences for her actions. If I reported to the police that my mother-in-law took away her granddaughter, the police would only consider it a family dispute and there would be no way to bring Megan to justice. Only by making Megan confess in person that she kidnapped my daughter could we get her behind bars. Having lived two lives, no one understands Megan better than me. Her pride, her arrogance, her disdain for me destined her to a bad ending. The police showed the silver handcuffs, ready to take Megan away. Megan was terrified, stumbling to defend herself. "Officer, she coerced me. I didn't do it. I really didn't." The police looked at her seriously. "Megan, we have found the child, Lily, whom you forcibly took from your home." Megan was dumbfounded. She had never expected the police would act so swiftly. The reason I had danced around Megan was to buy time for the police to find my daughter as quickly as possible and rescue her. My daughter was their most powerful leverage to threaten me, knowing I would rush to my in-laws' house. Naturally, they wouldn't leave my daughter there. The most likely place was Megan's house. When the police informed me through the earpiece that they had found my daughter, I breathed a sigh of relief. No longer pretending with Megan, I laid everything out on the table with her. Megan's face turned pale instantly. She stared at me blankly, then began to shout frantically, "No, I don't want to go to jail." No one expected Megan to attack the police, let alone take me as a hostage to threaten them. Megan grabbed a fruit knife from the dining table and pressed it against my neck. We were too close, and the incident was too sudden for anyone to react. Megan was not right emotionally. She shouted angrily at the police, "Get out, stay away from me, or I'll kill you." The police tried to calm Megan down as much as possible without provoking her. "I don't want to go to jail. All of you get out." Megan waved the sharp knife, signaling the police to back off. The blade was pressed against my neck, and blood began to flow. For my safety, the police dared not move any further. Everyone was trying to persuade Megan. But her emotions had already collapsed. All she wanted was to escape with me as her hostage. In a critical moment, I suddenly asked Megan, "The person you are most jealous of isn't Kate, but me, right?" Megan froze, staring blankly at me, unwilling to reveal her deepest insecurity. "What nonsense are you talking about? Why would I be jealous of you? Your beloved husband, the man you love, is me. You're just a fool I've been playing around with. What do I have to be jealous of you for?" I calmly laughed and said, "You're jealous of my loving parents and my harmonious family. Unlike you, who grew up in a miserable family, your father cheats on your mother, and every time he messes around with other women outside, your mother takes it out on you, using you as a punching bag. Megan, you're nothing but a complete pity." Megan lost her composure completely. She went crazy, shouting at me in a fit of rage. Shut up, you slut." I responded, "Shut up." Amidst the chaos, I suddenly looked up and shouted, "Megan's mother, why are you here?" Megan froze for a moment and subconsciously looked up. Taking advantage of this gap, the police officer who was cooperating with me immediately rushed forward and pulled me out. Only then did Megan react, still struggling desperately. "Ah!" A painful scream rang out as Megan struggled with the police. The knife in her hand accidentally stabbed her own belly. The mother-in-law, who was being held on the side, saw the scene, turned pale with fright, and exclaimed, "Call an ambulance quickly. My granddaughter must not be harmed." And I visited David in prison and brought my lawyer with me. David stared at me viciously through the glass window. "You slut. How dare you come to see me?" I had my lawyer submit a divorce agreement to David. "Sign it?" Seeing the agreement, I handed it over. David burst into laughter. "Do you want a divorce and to take most of my property? Dream on, bitch. Do you want a divorce?" "But I won't allow it." I scrutinized David. "How did I ever turn a blind eye and not see the scum in front of me? I'm giving you the divorce agreement as a formality. If you don't agree, I can sue for divorce at any time. Your affair is a fact. Divorce is inevitable." David was furious. He pounded on the table, threatening to kill me. After being stopped by the guards, he changed his tactics to threats. "I'll be out in a few months, and then we'll see if I kill you or not." I laughed, mocking his naivety. "Do you think no one knows what you've been up to? You'll be out in 10 years, if you're lucky." David looked at me in disbelief, his eyes filled with astonishment. "You bastard, what have you done?" I replied. "The USB drive you hid in your father's study, I've already handed it over to Mr. Chen at your company." David, who had just stood up, instantly slumped back into his chair. No one knew better than him what this meant. He had embezzled company assets and siphoned off project funds. After I submitted the evidence of his crimes, the company had already decided to take action against him. With tens of millions in dirty money, such a large sum was enough to keep David inside for 10 years. He wanted to get back at me and find me after a decade. David was scared and began to cry, admitting his mistakes to me. Kneeling before me, he begged, "Wife, I was wronged. I just made the mistakes that any man would make. Why must you be so ruthless towards me, wife? I beg you to help me. I promise to turn over a new leaf when I get out." Moments ago, he was threatening to kill me, and now he was desperately begging, addressing me as his wife. His change of heart was swift indeed. Unfortunately, I had long seen through the true nature of this scumbag. His tearful plea was sickening. I didn't want to spend another minute in this hellhole, leaving the scumbag to enjoy it on his own. "The agreement is left for you to sign. Let me know when it's done." David kept pleading with me, repeatedly calling my name. I stopped in my tracks and turned to look back. He thought I had changed my mind, looking at me with joy. "Wife, have you come to your senses? Have you decided to help me?" I gave a cold smile. "I just forgot to tell you one piece of news." David paused, asking, "What is it?" I spoke slowly. "Megan is pregnant, and it's a boy. It's a pity she stabbed herself to death." David went completely crazy, charging at me like a frenzied beast, forgetting that we are now people from two different worlds. No matter how crazy he became, he couldn't pose any threat to me. The glass door of the prison separated him from me. His remaining years were destined to be spent in prison, repenting for his mistakes. Stepping out of jail, I saw my father and my daughter. After treatment, my father's illness had been effectively controlled, and his health was gradually improving. When my daughter saw me, she waved her hands excitedly. Lily wants a hug. I bent down, lifted her, and held her tightly in my arms. The pleasant surprise of regaining what was lost brought tears to my eyes. I had promised to protect my daughter and ensure her well-being for a lifetime, and I had kept that promise. Seeing my teary eyes, my father felt heartbroken. Lily, everything is past now. It's good that they're gone, don't be sad. I shook my head. Dad, I'm not sad, I'm happy. I expressed how wonderful it was for 3 generations of us to live happily together in the future. In my second chance at life, the 2 most important people in my life were safely by my side. What else could make me happier than this? No, even my tears were tears of joy. I vowed to be their strongest support and prevent them from being hurt in the slightest. David was sentenced to 10 years. Megan's crimes were even more severe than his, leading to a direct sentence of 12 years. When the judgment was made, David's parents fainted in the courtroom. His father suffered a sudden heart attack and passed away a week after returning home from the hospital. His mother, though not dead, couldn't withstand the relentless blows and went completely crazy. Following the court's ruling, I successfully divorced David. I was granted custody of my daughter, Lily. David's assets were frozen and seized by the court due to financial fraud. However, this did not cause any substantial harm to me. I moved out of David's house and back to my parents' home. Kate returned the $800,000 that she had kept for me. Initially, this money was partly provided by Megan and partly transferred from my in-laws' account with no connection to David. With this money as a safety net, my life became much easier. My dad's health was improving day by day, and in his spare time, he helped take care of my daughter. He would pick her up and drop her off at school every day, allowing me to work outside and realize my own value. Although my salary was not high, it was enough to cover the family's expenses. Most importantly, the company was close to home, allowing me more quality time to spend with my family. Despite going through dark times, when the clouds clear, my sky will be clear and bright. The future is full of sunshine and hope.